You are listening to Storymakers, the podcast for women who are ready to step into their true identity, live with meaningful purpose, find belonging and connection, grow in leadership, and walk boldly in faith. Here you can uncover the story that you were created to live because you were made for such a time as this. Our souls get a little bit worried and scared about people having opinions about us, not liking our choices, rejecting who we are, judging us against themselves. Like, this is a humanity problem. We all have it. And if you cast a stone at somebody else, please be careful of the pianos that you walk underneath. So I am contextualizing all of it today into something that's a little bit more of a niche fear. Yes, let's just call it that. It's a niche fear. I'm calling it the fear of woman instead of just the fear of man. Because as women, we want to know who we are. We want to know what we're called to, and we want to belong somewhere. And that means finding other women to belong with. So if you feel like you walk on eggshells in your friendships, if you're constantly managing what other people think, maybe more than friends, maybe it's your mom, your parents, your kids, your boss, right? The people that work for you, all of the constant mental and emotional labor you put into it, or you're afraid to be disappointed or to feel or just be misunderstood. Maybe you are scared that if you're really honest about who you are, you're going to be rejected or left behind, or you'll be ghosted or whatever. And here's the truth. You will. This is how we're not just human. We're just living this human life, and those things are going to happen to us. But the fear, living under it, because it's kind of set there, one, in the nature of our soul, two, societal, I don't know, patterns. But when you start recognizing what's actually happening and how it is informing you and who you are and how you show up and how you operate, it's not just exhausting you. It's actually stealing from you. It's stealing your peace and your presence and your power, your personal power of personal responsibility, right? So we're talking about the fear of woman, and not just the fear of being judged by other women, but the actual, I think, deeper fear of being abandoned. And what happens, let's also say, not just abandoned, betrayed. And I think at the root of all of it is disconnection. That's the biblical story. The root is disconnection. Choices that lead to disconnection. And then, hallelujah, Jesus came and gave us a way to reconnect to the Father. But what happens when you stop trying to live your life thinking and operating and believing and feeling like you are responsible to keep everybody happy and never let anybody just be disappointed or suffer their own natural consequences? And you finally start letting them think and feel and do whatever they are going to think and feel and do. And you just don't have enough power to keep that from happening. So first we have to name it. And that's, we've heard of the fear of man. It's that biblical phrase that describes the trap of living unto other people's approval or validation, trying to be affirmed by other people. But I think, again, for a lot of women, it's not the fear of man, which is the general term in the Bible for humanity, right? Including men and women. But it's not the fear of man that wounds deepest as much as when we niche down a little bit and we get to the fear of the woman. And we get afraid of being left out or being talked about, being judged, misunderstood, being seen as too much or not enough, which is basically two sides of the same coin. If you're too much here, it means you're not enough over here. If you're not enough over here, then you're too much over here. Like, that just kind of, if you struggle with feeling like you're too much, then you're also somewhere along the lines feeling like you're not enough, and vice versa. And then I think we also fear the get close with somebody and then be ghosted, get betrayed, have something we said used against us, whatever. And that fear doesn't just live in our heads, it's actually showing up in our body, and it shows up in our racing thoughts and our emotional shutdown, after you send the text and it's left on read, like, they read it, but they didn't respond to you. And then, like, you get personal about it and decide it has something more to do with you than the fact that she has a business or kids or she's driving, she's being safe, like a lot of us aren't, right? Or we get in that constant social audit of how we're coming across to people. And all of this stuff keeps us guarded. It shuts our voice down. It keeps us from developing true friendships, even. Proverbs 29:25 says that the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. And so we have to consider, like, how do we actually step into trusting the Lord and avoid the snare of the fear of the humanity around us? All these people just acting like people, people, people. So this verse applies not just to the power of humanity around us, but, like, let's dial it in, the fear of women's opinions. And that snare is like an emotional trap, like an entrapment. And we get stuck in cycles of people pleasing and passive aggression, avoidance, escapism, insecurity, all the things. In Galatians 1:10, it says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Ouch. That's, I did. You can check it out. Galatians 1:10. I'm not saying that to you. He said it. Okay. Friendship built on the performance that we operate from, the fear that underlies it will never become a safe haven for us and a soft place to land. Like, the things that our hearts crave in a connection of deep friendship, we'll never get that if and you can tell the difference when you're with somebody where there's a deep connection and you're building something there versus when you are performing or camouflaging yourself, being a chameleon to fit in, right? You can tell the difference between actually being with somebody because you're trying to fit in with them and being with somebody because you belong with them. Fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. And I think, especially in childhood, we think that because we don't know ourselves yet, and even as adults, we don't know ourselves yet. As you begin to learn more about who you are, what makes you tick, what you're called to, how God uniquely designed you, you start going and putting yourself in a position where you find people who want that. And that's where you find a belonging. If you love coaching, you're going to feel such a strong sense of belonging if you're in a group of coaches, because you're all, like, after the same thing. You're all helping oriented and you love talking about the same thing. Maybe you're business owners and you love chatting and swapping. But if you are, talking to your best friend of 20 years about coaching and she's like, I don't get this. There's nothing personal there. It's not that your relationship is void, never meant anything. It just means that she's different than you. And don't you love that about her? Right? We don't need to find ourselves in everybody. We don't need to, like, ask somebody else to be there for us in every area, every interest, every moment of need. We need different kinds of people in our lives to bring fulfillment and find belonging in different ways. We're not just it's not a one size fits all. The only one size fits all is our actual all in all. His name is Jesus, right? So there is actually neuroscience, there's psychology behind the dynamic of the fear of man and fearing women. And I love Dr. Caroline Leaf. She talks about how our brains are wired for connection, for safety. And when we have these relational wounds that are, probably from our past and our friends, our brothers and sisters, moms, dads, any kind of authority figure in our life and caretakers, when we have wounds from those relationships that are not healed yet, the brain scans and, well, the brain scans that they show in her research shows danger. And the assumption of rejection is there, right? So it's the brain is saying, I'm looking for connection and safety, scanning all of the time. Where do I fit and who am I? Like, who do I belong to? And when there's a lot of spaces that are unhealed, then the brain is always feeling that there's a threat. And then Dr. Renee Brown, she talks about in Daring Greatly, a really great book, that she says that connection is why we're here. But in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, like really seen. And that is a level of vulnerability that's really scary. If you have ever felt ashamed for your emotions or mocked for the passion you carry, if you have felt excluded, but you don't know why, or betrayed by somebody you thought was safe to talk to, right? So being seen and really seen for who you are is very scary. But in the absence of healing, fear starts to shout and be louder than love in our lives. And we start overthinking after we hang out with a friend or a group of women. We start apologizing for the needs that we have or the feelings we experience. And uh, we start maybe avoiding conflict or confrontation or just being honest in order to stay the nice girl, which, like I don't do nice girl. I'm about, let's be a good woman. Um, but nice girl doesn't have probably never fit me. I think we start withholding the truth to maintain a little bit more of a peace in our relationship type of surface. And sometimes I think we assume we are not liked by people if we feel that they are distant from us and not like connecting with us, if they're not warm and friendly and sending emojis in their text messages or exclamation marks. It's easy to think like they must not like me. Well, what if they're just going through something? What if they're shy? What if they're exhausted? What if they have a story that's not about you, right? I always tell myself that. What if this is not about you, Laura? But God never meant for friendship to be a battlefield or something terrible to deal with or difficult to find. So if fear has been driving any of your friendships, you're going to either perform for it, you're going to withdraw from it, or you're going to try to manipulate it. And none of those things bring peace, and none of those things make friends. So healing actually is going to start when you decide to trust God more than you fear people, like the word says. And that's First Thessalonians 2 says that we're not trying to please people, but God, he's the one that tests our hearts. So the freedom you're looking for doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being known by God, and choosing to live like that is enough. And I know that feels very intangible. And I always like to bring the intangible into the tangible. So let's dive a little deeper on that, but back into the state of like we're looking for our identity. There's two levels of identity. There's the kingdom identity, who you are in the body of Christ, and who you are uniquely made, but in the image of God, formed uniquely in your mother's womb, and nobody's like you, right? You need to know who you are, but you need the foundation of the kingdom identity of a daughter of God to undergird your personal identity that you can find here as you walk this one wild, wonderful life on earth. So name the wound that you have. Like if there's a fear or something that you're struggling with in a relationship, I encourage you just to take these few steps and actually name the wound. Write down where it started. Was it in middle school? You remember on the playground, you're playing tetherball, like I was, and you felt betrayed by something a girl said, right? Or there was a clique at church. I'm not really like a clique kind of girl. I think there's a lot of groups of people who have found their connection. And then I think when you feel like you're on the outside, you feel like it's a click, but when you're on the inside, you feel like you belong. So I don't judge people for clicks. I'm just like, you found something. I'm still looking for mine. You go with your bad self. Maybe it was a relationship issue with your mom, right? Name it and write it down, and then renew your identity and like do the work of asking God, like, who am I? Who do you say I am? And also meditate on Psalm 139, Ephesians 1, 4 through 6, and Romans 8:15. And tell yourself, I am already accepted by God. I don't have to earn approval. I'm unique. I'm valuable. I'm loved. And there's hope for me. And then practice being vulnerable with just like one person. If you need to go find an elderly woman in a nursing home and she's your girl, then go find her, that somebody who's trustworthy. You don't have to overshare to prove anything. Like, just take a small risk and share a little bit about yourself and tell the truth and be who you are and see what happens. Right. And then choose truth over assumption. Like, let's look at the facts before you make your weird interpretation, and ask questions, get curious, get clarification, and be brave enough to clear the air if there is a challenging situation and you don't know what's happening. Ask a question. Just don't ask it from your offense and your pain. Ask it with curiosity, compassion, and kindness. And then pray and ask God to help you see other women, that they are not like a threat. They aren't competition. They're just a beloved daughter, just like you, with their own wounds and walls and stories. And they're just getting by like the rest of us. So when you start seeing all the women around you, like they are like you, and you have compassion for yourself, you'll start actually having compassion for them. So perfect love casts out fear. That's 1 John 4:18. And when you live from God's love instead chasing others' approval, you start becoming more stable in your own identity and your worth, and having stronger, clear, kind boundaries, and softening your heart. And then you start getting relationships that are more about that curiosity I was talking about. More curious instead of comparing. More grace, less gossip. More truth, less, not less niceness, just truth over niceness, I guess. And more consistency about showing up to connection over like performing and being a chameleon to fit in. That's what it means to fear God, the one who made you in his image, that you keep trying to change instead of fearing people, the fear of man and the fear of woman. So you reverence his truth over everybody else's opinions and your fears about their opinions. And then you get in alignment with his peace, and you're not considering everybody else's reactions. It's like, it's okay to care what other people need and want and be part of it, especially if you are part of the solution, because you have responsibility and authority. Let's just say spouse, um being a mother, you have a responsibility and authority in your children's lives to care about what they care about, but you don't have any authority to change people's minds. That's theirs. The way they don't have authority to change yours. It's just you. Like, you're the only one, right? So you don't have to be liked or approved of or invited or validated by everybody to live like a meaningful, purposeful, aligned with God's will life. Then I think the fear of rejection from other women is such a real, painful experience, and I've been through it a lot. It doesn't have to be a prison, and you don't have to be a victim of that, because it's going to undermine and undermine all of the relationships you currently have or could have. Right? If you act like you've been in a prison from that pain and the fear of rejection and the whatever, it affects what you're bringing to the table in every relationship you have now and could possibly be in later. But you have permission to let people judge you. You can let them misunderstand and talk about you and still stay deeply rooted in who God says you are and who you know yourself to be and who you know that you're becoming. Because it's okay that you are walking out this process. And you can let all of these people think what they want to think and talk about whatever they want to talk about. And they can be mean if they are going to be mean. Stop hanging out with them, right? You don't have to get bitter. You don't have to just give up. You can actually just manage yourself and your own paradigm in such a way that you just allow them to go through their process because you don't want them controlling you and the process you're in and where your paradigm's at and what you think on and feel and do. You don't want anybody controlling that, or you don't want them to think about that if somebody was living under the fear of what you might think or feel. Ew. Consider it for a second. Imagine that there are 10 people in your life, everybody who lives in your home, and then like the first layer of people that you meet on a daily basis, they are all living their lives worried about you being disappointed, being upset, being angry, judging them, and comparing yourself, which only brings pride or pain. Imagine them all living that way because of you. Yuck. I know you don't want that. None of us would say, like, yeah, I hope those people are afraid of me. If you are, schedule a coaching session and let's talk about that. Anyway, I would say that if you wouldn't want that for them, you need to give yourself the same permission to say, you don't have to live like that. What would you say to those people? Say it to yourself. Look in the mirror and say, you do not have to live like that. Nobody's expecting you to live in the fear of what they think and feel and do. Tell yourself again and again. There's no reason for it. There's no fear in love. Perfect love drives out fear. Fear has to do with punishment. He is not punishing us, and we are not punishing our people, and our people are not punishing us. This, even if you've been punished and it's created deep wounds and there's been a lot of pain, that doesn't mean you have to live in the fear that other people are out to punish you with their judgment and their opinion and their rejection, abandonment, betrayal. We're not going to live like victims anymore. We're not slaves to fear. We're daughters of the King. So love frees us from the fear of other women's opinions that we're not enough, or the fear that we're going to end up alone, or the fear that we don't get what we deserve. We're going to lose our place, right? Love says you're already chosen, you're secure, you're safe, you are already known, and you are fully loved by God. The only opinion that leads to life, freedom, and wisdom is God's. Isaiah 51:12 says that I am he who comforts you. Who are you that you are afraid of man who dies and have forgotten the Lord your maker? If you want to keep living to avoid rejection, you will miss the boldness and the beauty of becoming who God made you to be. But when you can just say, I'll do what is mine to do and let them do what's theirs, with peace in your heart, you actually reclaim so much power by recognizing what is your personal responsibility and what is somebody else's. So I want you to know that you can leak your own power out and lose it. And you don't have to. One of the biggest traps in the fear of the women around us and the people is a subtle way we try to manage all of their emotions and needs and opinions. And because it culturally, societally, it sounds noble and looks kind to constantly manage other people's emotions, needs, and opinions. But underneath, it's rooted in fear. If I say it this way, you won't be upset with me. If I downplay this win that I just had, maybe she won't feel so insecure about what she's doing. If I avoid bringing this up, maybe she won't pull away or hang up. I can't say it enough. You're not responsible for somebody else's thoughts, feelings, reactions, triggers, expectations, and their interpretations. So you can't manage other people's happiness, their comfort, or their paradigm because it's a form of control disguised as care that drains your energy and distorts all of your decisions and leaves you emotionally exhausted because you're carrying all that you're operating from mental and emotional labor 24/7. You weren't created to carry what only God can really hold. So show up in truth and be kind and have boundaries, but don't try to control other people's fears or thoughts or life by changing yourself, right? Usually we're not in control of manipulation because we're malicious and trying to control or manipulate. We just find ourselves doing that and people experiencing us that way because we think we have something to do with it. We've given ourselves too much again, I get the word. We give ourselves too much credit. We think that if they didn't feel bad and they didn't hang up, it's because we withheld ourselves. We withheld the honest truth. We changed who we are so that they wouldn't hang up. So we would get more time with them because that makes us feel good. That's controlling, trying to control. It's not working. That's the only thing. That's how our power is leaking out slowly. We're trying to heal other people's wounds and prevent them from being disappointed. But all of it is by our own striving. So you stop living from a place of inner authority. You start actually bending your life around other people's emotional ecosystem and the weather inside of it. But let her take responsibility for her story, and you just focus on taking responsibility for yours. It has been a long journey for me. I'm still in the midst of it. But real friendship isn't about keeping each other comfortable and always being exactly what each other needs in every single moment. It's about actually growing together in freedom, respect for one another, and honesty. So let's tell the truth and be kind and not manage one another and stop equating that keeping people happy means that we're keeping ourselves safe, right? I know a lot of it speaks to our identity. Like, who am I if she walks away from me? Who am I if I'm not chosen by them, not preferred by her, not kept as a friend by that group, right? Because we don't just fear somebody leaving, we fear that their leaving actually means something about us. Again, we're taking too much credit for their actions, making it personal, making it about us instead of making it about them. We think we are too much, not enough, not worth staying for. And that fear, I think it starts to fracture our soul, right? That those places, we get these little cracks, and that's where the power starts leaking out. And then every time we abandon ourselves to avoid being abandoned by someone else, we actually lose chunks of who God made us to be, or we smash it, or we hide it, whatever we do. Like, don't hide your light, right? It's what actually happened. I'm going to back up to that for a second. In order to prevent abandonment or rejection by somebody else, we end up abandoning and rejecting ourselves first. When we shut down who we are, we suppress who we are, we suppress what we believe, think, want, feel, need. We edit all of that and shrink it and silence it to prevent being abandoned and rejected by somebody else. But we were the first to abandon and reject ourselves. And so we are not winning when we do this. We end up with a version of us left that's not real in the friendship. It's like a placeholder. But we weren't, I always say this, like we're created to care, but we don't have to carry other people. We can have compassion and empathy and honor for them, but we don't have to carry their fears, their happiness, their healing, or their identity, purpose, and belonging. That is God's job. Jesus is their all in all. You and I are not. So we support and serve, but we cannot save anybody. We can love and we can grieve, but we cannot control anybody. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest." It doesn't say, go to her and make sure she's okay so you can finally rest. And when we trade our authenticity for an attachment with anyone, we actually lose both. We can't have a true attachment to somebody without the authenticity. So I want you to think about all this and stand on the truth that you're not responsible to keep people from judging, leaving. If somebody walks away, doesn't call you back, it does not change your worth and it does not define your worth. You can care deeply without carrying what's not yours. And Jesus is never going to leave you or forsake you, even if other people do. You're not alone. Even when you feel loss and pain and grief, you're anchored in love because you have the Most High God, who is your creator, your good and loving Father, your constant companion. So when we fear women's rejection, judgment, disappointment, and opinions more than we trust God's God's acceptance and his opinion, we actually trade out our intimacy for insecurity. But I know that healing is possible when we recenter our identity and our purpose and belonging in him and rebuild trust intentionally with safe and loving people. And I pray right now that those people become tangible to you, that you know enough about yourself to go take intentional steps and actions that will lead you to the people that you're meant to belong to. And when you find them, I pray that you grow in your own healing process of becoming the very friend that they're looking for in parts and pieces. Neither of you are each other's all in all, and you don't need attachment to them. You just need a connection. And you can do that from a safe place, and no one will reject you because you bring the fear of rejection into the room with you, because you're going to walk in knowing that no matter what happens in that room, you are fully loved, fully worthy, and fully hopeful and powerful because of the love of God in your life. I bless you to be a friend, to go find friends, and to walk in the perfect love of God that casts out all of the fear of man, humanity, and woman. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. And to learn more about me, my work, and how we can connect, visit sterlingandstonementoring.com or check the show notes. And until next time, remember, all things are possible and figure outable.